section is transfer learning. So in transfer learning, we make use of knowledge gained while solving one problem and applying it to different but related problem. So this is what we call transfer learning. So for example, when you do one process, we will gain some knowledge. So we will use the same knowledge for another problem which is related to that first problem. So that is what transfer learning. So for example, knowledge gained while learning to recognize cars can be used to some extent to recognize trucks. So that means if you are using car data set trained on a neural network and the weight which you used for that recognizing cars can be used for recognizing other vehicles like trucks or heavy vehicles, etc. So next option is pre-training. Pre-training means the network is trained with a big amount of data, and during the training, the model learns the weight and bias. And next is fine-tuning. These weights can be transferred to other networks for testing or retaining a similar new model. And the model can start with the pre-trained weights instead of training from scratch. So here one example is that transfer learning can be known in another way, that is pre-training and fine-tuning. In pre-training, we will train a network using, say for example, I'm using two sets of images. First one is the ImageNet general images, and I am developing my network. I'm training the network using ImageNet data. Once I trained the model have weights and bias. So these weights and bias I will be taken from the model, and that will be used for classifying another set of data. Not the same data, another set of data we are using the same data. So same weights and biases. So that we can call it as a transfer learning. So in that case, we are not going to train the network from scratch. So we are using the pre-trained network weights instead of training from scratch. So this is what we call transfer learning. So here we can see the pictorial representation. So here you have source data from ImageNet. You are having a source model, large amount of data is here. So you are training your data. Then transferred knowledge. Transferred knowledge means the bias and weights are transferred to the target model. Then you are testing on the Pascal data. So this is what I call ImageNet is one kind of data set and Pascal is another kind of data set. These are not different but relatively same. So we can say that once we trained on this ImageNet, the same weights and bias can be used to test the other model using other kind of data. So this is what we call transfer learning. So here in transfer learning, there are a lot of pre-trained networks available like GoogleNet, MobileNet, RusNet, Inception V3. There are a lot of nets are available. So we can use that networks and you can take the weights and bias from that network and you can use it in your work. So then we can call it as a transfer learning. A pre-trained model is a model which is already trained in the same domains as the intended domain. For example, for an image recognition task, Inception model is already trained on ImageNet. So this model is trained on ImageNet, so I can use simply that same network to test my images. So why deep learning? So why we going for deep learning? So the reason is that it's a universal learning approach, and DL approach is sometimes called universal learning because it can be applied to almost any application domain. And it is robust. So deep learning approaches do not require the precisely designed feature. Instead, optimal features are automatically learned for the task at hand. And the robustness to natural variations of the input data is achieved. And generalization. So the same DL approach can be used in different applications or with different data types. Transfer learning. In addition, approach is helpful when do not have sufficient available data. If you don't have sufficient available data, you can go for transfer learning. And scalability. The DL approach is highly scalable. Microsoft invented a deep neural network known as RusNet, and this network contains 1,202 layers and is often implemented at a supercomputing scale. And there is a big initiative at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, LLNL, in developing frameworks for new network like this, which can implement thousands of nodes. That's what I called the big computational power is required to implement all these networks. So in deep learning, a computer model learns to perform classification tasks directly from images, text, or sound. And deep learning models can achieve state-of-the-art accuracy, sometimes exceeding human-level performance. If you train it properly, it will get better accuracy than human-level performance. And applications. So the deep learning architecture such as deep neural networks, deep belief networks, recurrent neural networks, and convolutional neural networks have been applied to fields including computer vision, speech recognition, natural language processing, audio recognition, social networking, filtering, machine translation. Some other applications are automatic speech recognition, image recognition, image restoration, natural language processing, drug discovery and toxicology, recommendation system, bioinformatics, medical image analysis, forecasting, etc. The next is challenges with the scarcity of data. So with the growing availability of data as well as powerful and distributed processing units, deep learning architectures can be successfully applied to major industrial problems. So as I told earlier, the networks are going more deeper. We need more information to process. So we have to provide a lot more data to learn or train the system. So it's a main problem. So however, deep learning is traditionally big data driven and lacks efficiency to learn abstractions through clear verbal definitions if not trained with billions of training samples. To make DL work with a smaller available data set, some of the approaches are in use. If you have less number of data, you can use some of the approaches like data augmentation. Data augmentation means you can take the data, you can flip or rotate or you can add noise to it and you can increase the number of data. Then you have to go for transfer learning or recursive classification technique as well as synthetic data generation using GAN, that is generative adversarial network, which I explained earlier. So next is one-shot learning is also bringing new avenues to learn from very few training samples. So one-shot learning means you have to train a small network. You have to develop your own small network with the lowest number of data. It can provide a better accuracy. So next is adopting unsupervised approaches. So a major thrust in towards combining deep learning with unsupervised learning methods, because as an AI machine, the machine should give output based on unsupervised manner. So systems developed to set their own goals and develop problem-solving approaches are the future research direction, surpassing supervised approaches requiring lots of data a priori. For supervised, we know that we need more information at the initial stage, but in unsupervised, we don't want any information. The system itself clusters it into different categories. The thrust of AI research, including deep learning, is towards meta-learning, that is learning to learn, and involves automated model designing and decision-making capabilities of the algorithm. It optimizes the ability to learn various tasks from fewer training data, and influence of cognitive neuroscience in deep learning. So inspiration drawn from cognitive neuroscience, developmental psychology to decipher human behavioral pattern are able to bring major breakthrough in applications such as enabling artificial agent learns about spatial navigation on their own, which comes naturally to most living beings. So by means of cognitive neuroscience, we can imitate the cognitive system by means of intelligent agents. To build super intelligent machines, we must gain a deeper understanding of human brain. Equally, exploring AI can help us gain a better understanding on what's going in our own heads. So to make a super intelligent machine, we must gain deeper understanding of human brain. Equally exploring AI can help us to get more idea about how our brain works. And with this, I will stop my presentation on deep learning. So I will give you a chance to ask any queries related to the first topics, machine learning and deep learning, and intro to AI. If you have any queries, you can ask now. Then I will move on to applications of AI.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Yes.
Sir, am I audible? Sir, okay. So actually, I'm from the chemical engineering background, but I'm applying some artificial neural network, one of my process. So I have one basic question: how to select the number of neurons in hidden layers, and how many hidden layers are required for a particular application based upon the input data? And is there any relation to
hidden layers? We are not deciding the hidden layers. We are giving the number of layers. Say, for example, there are some specific rules for defining the. So I will explain you once this session comes. Next session I will
okay,
explain
sir.
how we are
Yes.
going to choose the number of layers. So there are certain rules.
Yes. Okay.
I will cover it in the next session.
Yes, sir. So it will be helpful for me.
Okay, sir.
Okay, sir. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other question?
Participants, if you have any queries, you please ask. Sir, we will continue the session, sir. At the end of the session, the participants may ask.
Okay, fine.
Okay, sir.
So now I am going to talk about applications of deep learning. So first I would like to give some applications of deep learning for classification. So in this case, in deep learning, especially CNN, features from an image or signal is automatically learned from the training process. So understand the problem in terms of a hierarchy of concepts. When we talk about these convolutional neural networks, we have to understand how the neural network learns and how making decisions. So to understand the problem in terms of a hierarchy of concepts, in this hierarchy, each concepts build on the top of the other. That means here you can see number of input layer, output layer, and the hidden layers. So concept in the lower layers of the network encode some basic representation of the problem, whereas higher level layers use these basic layers to form more abstract concepts. So the initial layers will take a basic representation of the problem. On the other hand, the higher level layers use some basic layers to form abstract concepts. And this hierarchical learning allows to completely remove hand-designed feature extraction process and treat CNN as end-to-end learner. So there is no human intervention in this CNN. So the network itself learns. So we will see how it learns. So say, for example, I am giving you an example of an image. Given an image, supply the pixel intensity values as input to the CNN. So a series of hidden layers are used to extract a feature from our input image. So these hidden layers build upon each other in a hierarchical fashion. At first, only edge-like regions are detected in the lower level layers of the network. First, we are getting edges. These edge regions are used to define corner, whereas edges intersect and contours or outlines of the object. So initially we are getting edges. Next we are getting edge regions or corners. And next is combining corners and contours can lead to abstract or object parts in the next layer. So in the third layer, you will get combining the corners and contours and you are getting an abstract of the original object. So this type of concepts, these filters are learning to detect are automatically learned. There is no intervention by us in the learning process. So the network itself learns about the different features. So there is no human intervention in the learning process. So we are unaware about how many layers being used and how the layers are getting the data. So finally, the output layers used to classify the image and obtain the output class label. So neural network basis. So as I said earlier, neural network is nothing but the imitation of human neuron. So this is a human neuron anatomy which having dendrites, nucleus, soma, cell body, myelin sheath, terminal button, and axons. So this the right side is showing a artificial neuron where we have inputs x1, etc., xn, weights w1, etc., w4, weighted sum is there, a step function is there. As you know, each x is connected to neuron via weights w, consisting of weights w1, w2, etc., wn, meaning that for each input x, we also have an associated weight. So here we are assuming that for each weight, there is an associated weight w. And finally, the output node takes the weighted sum. So the output node is this one. So this output node takes the weighted sum of all the inputs. That is x1 w1 plus 2 w2 plus x3 w3 plus x4 w4. And expressing the output mathematically, you can write like this. That is summation of I is from 1 to n wi xi. And once the sum is there, we have to activate. So as you know, the action potential activate the neuron. Similar way, we have to activate the neuron or neural network by means of an activation function or step function. So there are different kind of step functions available for activating this neuron. So there are functions like sigmoid, TANH, rectified linear unit ReLU or leaky ReLU. So the equations for corresponding activation functions and the derivatives are shown in here. So in this, mainly for classification, we are going with the rectified linear unit that is good in providing classification. Rectified unit, linear unit having value x if it is x is greater than f of x is x if x greater than 0 and it is 0 less than x less than 0. So this is the rectified linear unit that is the best one for image classification. So first you have to choose the neural network, then you have to activate the neural network using activation function. Then we will see how we are going to design a convolutional neural network, how many layers we can provide. All this information we can study in this lecture. So in traditional feed-forward neural network, each neuron in the input layer is connected to every output neuron in the next layer. So we call it as a fully connected layer. So here, however, in CNN, we don't use fully connected layer until every last layer in the network. So we can thus define a CNN as a neural network that swaps in a specialized convolutional layer in place of fully connected layer for at least one of the layer in the network. So here you can see that input layer L1, middle layers L2, L3, L4. These are the convolutional layers here, and output layer is the fully connected layer or the output layer. So input layer, fully connected layer. In between we have convolutional layers. So a nonlinear activation function such as ReLU is then applied to the output of the convolutions, and process of convolution activation continues until we finally reach the end of the network and apply one or two fully connected where we can obtain our final output. So how you are going to form a CNN? So first you have to take a input layer. That input should be given to the first convolution layer. After the convolution, we have to activate the convolution by means of an activation function, say for example ReLU. Then one activation is over. Then if you want to go for another convolution, you can go for another convolution. Then you have to connect it to the output layer or fully connected network. So here you can see that each layer in CNN applies a different set of filters. So typically hundreds or thousands of them, and it combines the results, feeding them output into next layer of the network. So during training, a CNN automatically learns the values for these filters. In the context of image classification, our CNN may learn to detect edges from raw pixels that in the first layer, and uses these edges to detect shapes or blobs in the second layer. Use these shapes to detect higher level features such as facial structures, part of a car, etc. in the highest layer of the network classification. Now we will see what is convolution in the imaging kernel. So in terms of deep learning, an image convolution is an element-wise multiplication of two matrices followed by a sum. Say for example, this is your 3x3 pixels chosen from an image. So by selecting a 3x3 kernel size of 3x3, and you are going for a convolution operation, you have a mask of averaging mask of ij, which is equal to 1/9 of 1111111. So if you take the average, it will be 1. So this is your convolution mask. You are using this convolution mask to convolve with the information. After convolution, you add all the values together and replace the central pixel 252 with 132. So you can replace 252 with 132, and you can move this mask to another side, right ways or left ways, and you can do the process until you entirely cover the 3x3 image, so that you are getting convolved output. That is your convolution operation or convolution layer operation. So after that, you have to move it to the another 3x3 matrix, and you have to cover the entire image for that 3x3 convolution. So here I will show an example. Assume that this is your image matrix. This is having value, and this is your 3x3 filter mask. And here you can see that if you apply, here you can see this. Here you can see this. This is the movement of slides or the mask through the image, and you are getting result like this. Once again, I will show. This is the method by which the mask moves over the image, and you are getting the corresponding convolution output at the other side. So from this 5x5 image matrix using a 3x3 filter mask, you are getting 3x3 filter size. This is how, means output dimension is input dimension minus kernel dimension plus 2 padding by stride plus 1, where stride means the movement of the mask, that is by 1 element. So we can stride 1, there is no padding I am using. 0 padding is not doing, so padding is 0. So the output dimension is 5 minus 3 plus 2 into 0 by 1 plus 1, that is 3. So a 5x5 image is came to 3x3 when I am taking a convolution of 3x3. So by after taking convolution itself, the dimension of the image is reduced from 5x5 to 3x3. Okay. Now the convolution layer is the core building block of the convolutional neural network, and here you can see that this is the image and this is the convolution kernel, and kernel is one time moved to the image, you are getting one output. So such n number of filter you can use. So here I am using 4 filter, means I am getting 4 outputs from this image. So once I am passing this kernel through the entire image, I am getting 1. Second, I am getting another 1. So likewise, I am getting 4 number of masks. So here assume that the input size of the image is 5x5. After convolution, I am getting 3x3. That is the size and size of the image is reduced. That is 5x5 become 3x3. But on the other hand, I am getting 4. I am using 4 filters of same kernel size. I am getting 4 images. That means 4 images stacked together. So 3x3 by 4 is the size, new size now. Okay. So if again I am going for a convolution, 3x3 become 1 by 1. So 1 by 1 by 4. So that means the length and the breadth reduces, but the width of the information increases. So these filters are small, but extend throughout the full depth of the volume. So here you can see that if you are getting more number of filter number, in the sense means that you are getting more filter, means your height and width and depth will be reduced and depth will increase. So you are getting more depth information than the width and the height. So after obtaining K activation maps, they are stacked together to form the input volume to the next layer in the network. So for inputs to the CNN, the depth is the number of channels in the image. Say for example, how many filters I am using here, that is the number of depth of the image. So layer types. So there are 3 parameters that control the size of output volume, the depth, stride, and 0 padding. So for a given convolution layer, the depth of the activation map will be K, or simply the number of filters we are learning in the current layer. So as one of the participants asked the question, how we are going to decide the number of filters. So that should be by trial and error. You have to input a different number of layers, and you have to see the accuracy of your system. Based on that, you have to choose the number of layers. This is what we call hyperparametric tuning. So these are the one of the bodies. Number of filter is number of the one of the parameters of the CNN. So we have to do it by trial and error, and we have to find which filter size suits for the network. So stride is the steps by which a filter is moved and convolved with output. You've seen in the previous step that Stride is nothing but how many steps we are moving the window along the data. So using zero padding, we can pad our input along the borders. If you want to get the same size at the output, you can zero pad the image, so that if you are using a 5x5 image, you will get the output at the side 5x5. But if you are not using the padding, you will get reduce the number of size and width and height of the image. And the amount of padding we apply is controlled by the parameter P. And putting all these parameters together, we can compute the size of the output volume, that is W minus F plus 2P by S plus 1. That is what we counted in the previous slide. And next is activation layers. So after each convolution layer in CNN, we apply a nonlinear activation function such as ReLU, ELU, or any other leaky ReLU. And an activation layer concept accepts an input volume of size W, input, H input, and D input, and then applies a given activation function. Since the activation function is applied in an element-wise manner, output of an activation layer is always the same as the input dimension. Say, for example, if you are having a 5x5 image convolved output, this is your convolution output. After convolution, in order to work the CNN, we have to activate the function. So in order to activate, you have to apply the activation function ReLU. ReLU will give only values which is greater than 0. So you will get all the other values except this negative value. This negative value will be 0 according to the ReLU rule. So this is the activated CNN values now. So here you can see that this is the size of the convolution layer, that is 4x4, and activation of is also same size. There is no reduction in the input dimension. So there is no dimensional change in activation function. So but there is dimensional change in convolution operation. Next is pooling layer. So there are two methods to reduce the size of an input volume convolution layer with a stride greater than 1 and pooling layers. So pooling means, as you know, we are using large number of data. So the system need to process this large number of data at a time. So if the large number of images we are using, it may be a burden to the system or complexity to the system. So in order to avoid that, we will again further reduce the size of the images by means of pooling. So there are two pooling, max pooling and average pooling. We will see in later slides. So now we have to see how we can design one CNN. So initially input is there. First you have a convolution layer. Then you have to activate it using ReLU. Then you have to pool. Then again convolution layer, ReLU, pool. Then fully connected layer. This is the output layer. So the primary function of the pool layer is to progressively reduce the spatial size or the receptive field size or the height and width of the input volume. So typically we will use a pool size of 2x2. So two types of poolings are there, max pooling and average pooling. So we will see one example. So here this is the previous example, that is convolved and activated value, activated CNN value. It's now here this is size of the image or the data is 4x4. Now I am going to apply max pooling by a factor of 2 with a stride of 2. So max pooling of a 2 means it will consider 2x2 matrix. 2x2 matrix means first yellow color. It will be a 2x2 matrix. Somebody muted me. Can you hear me?
No, sir. Now it's audible only.
Okay, somebody muted.
Oh, okay, sir. Let's see. You please again present the presentation, sir.
Yes, that's what I'm doing.
Okay, sir.
It's not getting connected. Wait for 1 minute.
Okay, sir.
Participants, please don't mute or start to present. It's creating a lot of issues here. Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in max pooling, we have seen 4x4. So using a 2x2 pool size, it is finding which one is the maximum value here. So here the maximum value is 3. So you are getting 3 here. Then it is stride is 2. So it is moving 2 elements right. So then it is 12,308. Maximum value is 12. Then it is moving down. Maximum value is 6. And moving to left, it is maximum value is 3. So you are getting max pooled value is 3, 12, and 3, 6. So here you can see that the size of the image after max pooling is reduced from 4x4 to 2x2. So the output dimension is input dimension minus kernel dimension by stride plus 2. The stride is stride plus 1. Stride is equal to 2. The padding is not applicable in case of pooling operation. So here we can find the output dimension is 4 minus 2 by 2 plus 1, that is 2. So size of matrix is now 2x2. So this is max pooling. Another case is average pooling. In average pooling, what we do is we will select these 4 columns or 4 matrix values, and we take the average of that will be put over here. Similarly, take the average of this one, it will be here. Average of this one here. Average of this one here. So this is what average pooling. So by pooling, again 4x4 is reduced to 2x2. So that we can see that by means of a single convolution and pooling operation, you reduce the image size into 2x2. So that the length and width is reduced to 2x2. This is what we call max pooling. Next is fully connected layers. So fully connected layers are always placed at the end of the network. So that we won't apply a convolution layer, then a fully connected layer followed by another convolution layer. So fully connected network only applied on the output side. Those are output layers. It is common to use 1 or 2 fully connected layers prior to applying the softmax classifier. The final layer is the softmax classifier. So now we can define our convolutional neural network as input, convolution, ReLU, that is the activation function, pooling, then again convolution, ReLU, pooling, then fully connected network, fully connected network. So next is batch normalization layers. So batch normalization layers or BN layers, as the name suggests, are used to normalize the activations of a given input volume before passing it to next layer of network. So we will normalize the values because we are using large number of data. So the processing time may be again a problem. So we will normalize the data by means of batch normalization. And batch normalization has been shown to be extremely effective in reducing the number of epochs it takes to train the neural network. If you want to reduce the number of iterations of neural network, so we have to use batch normalization. And here we have to use input, convolutional, ReLU, batch normalization, then pooling. So before pooling, you have to go for batch normalization. So next is dropout. So dropout is actually a form of regularization that aims to help prevent overfitting. So for each mini batch in our training set, dropout layers with the probability of P randomly disconnect input from the preceding layer to the next layer of the input network architecture. So it will be better, I will show with an example. Here you can see that this is the first fully connected layer and second fully connected layer, and there is no dropout. That means all the connections, all the nodes have connections to each other. But if I am applying a dropout of 50%, that means only here we have 12 connections. Dropout of 50% means here we have only 6 connections. And these 6 connections are only the required one. The others are redundant connections. So by applying a dropout, you can avoid the unwanted or redundant connection so that the computational cost will be reduced and also the overfitting will be reduced. So generally we may choose a dropout ratio of 0.5 in fully connected architecture. So now we have to write convolution, ReLU, patch normalization, pooling, fully connected, dropout, fully connected, dropout, then final fully connected or the classification layer. So we can use maximum 3 fully connected layers, and 2 of them should have dropout. And common architecture and training patterns. So convolutional neural networks are made up of 4 primary layers: convolution, pooling, ReLU, and fully connected. So taking these layers and stacking them in a particular pattern yields a CNN architecture. Following the most common form of CNN architecture is to stack a few convolution and ReLU layers, following them with a pool operation. So repeat this sequence until the volume width and height is small, at which point we apply one or more fully connected layer. So here you can see I'm giving input convolution ReLU into N, pooling into M, fully connected, then ReLU into K, then fully connected. So here star operation implies one or more, and the question mark indicates the optional operation. So here the common choice for each repetition include 0 less than n less than 3. That means you cannot put more than 3 convolution layers in a stack. So you cannot put 3 convolution layers together. So convolution ReLU, convolution ReLU, convolution ReLU. After that you have to go for pooling. Then you have to go for another convolution. So the maximum possible convolution layer you can go in a stretch is 3, and m greater than or equal to 0. Pooling can be any, it should be greater than or equal to 0. And fully connected layer should be 2. Maximum fully connected layer should be 2. Then the final fully connected layer. Before final fully connected layer, you can go for maximum of 2. So this is the rules when you are going to design the convolutional neural network. You cannot put more than 3 in a single stretch. Then you cannot put more than 2 fully connected in a single stretch. And make sure that fully connected layers are applied at the output side. So these are the rules. So based on this, we will see some common architecture for CNN. Assume that I am having an input image with the size 32 by 32 with the color channel 3. That is, it's an RGB. And I need to do one classification, either it is a class A or class B. So first, I am going to use a convolution of 5 by 5 convolution with a filter size of 8. That means I am using a convolution of 5 by 5 with 8 number of filters. So 8 number of filters means my input image size is 32 by 32. So 32 minus convolutional size is 5 by 5. So 32 minus 5 plus stride 1. So that is 28. So my image size will be 28 by 28 by 8 now. Then I am going to do a pooling. So here this is size 8. Now I am going to do a pooling by a factor of 2. 28 by 28 pooling by 2 means 28 minus 2 by 2 plus 1, that is 14. So I am getting 14 by 14 by 8. So initially I started with 32 by 32 image with filter size 8, having convolution 5 by 5. I am getting an output as 14 by 14, 8. And here also I am using ReLU function to activate. So this is the first combination, that is convolution, ReLU, and pooling. I am getting 14 by 14 by 8. Now you can see that the width and height is now about 14 and 14, and the number of filters is 8. Then again I am using a convolution of 5 by 5. Then 14 minus 5 plus 1, that is 10. My image size is 10 by 10. I am using activation function ReLU. Then 10 by 10. Then I am using 16 number of filters. So now 10 by 10 by 16, number of filters is 16 now. Then again pooling, divided by 2. So that is 5. 5 by 5 by 16. So my input image size is reduced to 5 by 5 and number of filters is increased to 16. So then I am giving it to fully connected layer, which is having 120. That is 5 into 5 into 16. This will be converted into a single column matrix or single vector, and that vector will be given to the first fully connected network. Then you are giving it to second fully connected network. Then you are giving it to the final fully connected network or softmax or sigmoid function for classification. So this is the method for a simple common architecture for training the pattern. So this will, the final classifier will classify the input as class A or class B. So this is a simple design. And there are some other CNN like multi-scale CNN. So here you can see that first I am doing the convolution operation, then ReLU. Here I am having 12 number of feature maps or filters. So here I am giving 64 by 64 image size, then max pooling by 2, then again 3 by 3 convolution, ReLU of 12, then max pooling by 2. Then the same signal image is given to 3 different categories. That is 1 by 1, 3 by 3 and 5 by 5. So these are different scales. Here you can see the common scale is 3 by 3. And in addition to the common scale, you have 2 more scales, 1 by 1 and 5 by 5. So that is why it is known as multi-scale. You have more than one scale in a single structure. Then concatenating all the features together, then again giving the first 2 fully connected network. After dropout, you are getting 16. Then fully connected 3. It is having 2 classification. That's why fully connected having 2 value. Then it is converting as normal or diseased case using the software classifier. So next one is a multi-path CNN. So here multi-path CNN means here you have one path, primary path. Here you have convolution of 3 by 3 with the 12 feature sample, ReLU, then max pooling by 1 by 2. Then from the convolution output, we have another parallel path. It's a convolution of 9 by 9 with 48 feature maps. And here again, this is 3 by 3, then 3 by 3 with 24, 3 by 3 with 24 and 9 by 9 with 48. Combining together, we are finding the result. Here, the advantage of this path is that this will give you the global structure of the image or signal, and this will give you the local structure. So you are getting both global and local structure from the image or data. So that will give better classification in future cases. So we can go for a classification using multipath CNN. And the next is the 4 steps to construct a deep learning model. So step 1 is first you gather your data. So images or signal, whatever it is, or any data. The data as well as the labels associated with each data. Number of images for each category should be approximately uniform. So make sure that you are getting, say for a 2 category or multi-category classification, make sure that you are getting approximately equal number of data. Otherwise, biasing may be there. So step 2, split your data set into training set and testing set. So in training case, either you have to use any of these 3 mechanisms, training 66.7 and testing 33.3, or 75-25 or 90-10. So this is the standard data split available nowadays. So this is the standard should be adopted when you go for a deep learning model. Next, train your network. Goal is to train our network to learn, recognize each of the categories in our labeled data. So when the model makes a mistake, it learns from the mistake and improves itself. So we already given the label to the data. So the machine can learn from the label, and sometimes it makes a decision wrong. It can learn from the label. Now we have to evaluate. Once our training is over, we have to validate it. Once validation is also over, we have to evaluate our test data. So for each of the image or data in our testing set, present them to the network and ask to predict what it thinks the label of the image. So once the training is over, the image or data should be given to the network and ask the network to predict. Then if it is predicting it as normal, then you check with the original label of the test data. If it is correct, your prediction is correct. Otherwise, it is wrong. So based on that, you have to prepare the confusion matrix. From the confusion matrix, you have to find the values such as precision, recall, F1 measure. All these values can be found out. So next is performance analysis of the network. So how you analyze the performance of the network? The performance of the network can be analyzed by means of confusion matrix. So here the figure shows the confusion matrix. This is the actual one and this is the predicted one. If positive is predicted as positive, then it is true positive. Positive is predicted as negative, then it is false positive. Negative is predicted as positive, then false negative, and negative is predicted as negative, it is true negative. So this is the confusion matrix, and we have to find the different parameters from confusion matrix. So accuracy is the overall accuracy of the system. That is how often our model is correct in prediction. So accuracy is TP plus TN, that is true positive plus true negative by all the values. And accuracy can tell us immediately whether the model is being trained correctly and how it may perform generally. So once you trained your model, you have to find the accuracy of model by finding the accuracy value, because this accuracy will tell how your model is correctly trained. And precision. Precision is the true positive rate by true positive plus false positive. And precision gives the positive prediction value. This value provides information on how efficiently our system avoids false positive. False positive, how we avoid. So that's what the system gives by giving precision value. Next, recall, also known as sensitivity of system. It gives the information about how efficiently the model reduces false negatives. How it reduces a false negative, that is given by recalls. This can be calculated as TP by TP plus FN. And next is F1 score. It determines the model's accuracy. This score gives the harmonic mean of precision and recall. It is nothing but 2 into recall into precision by recall plus precision. And this will give the harmonic mean of the precision and recall. So next is ROC curve. So we can plot the ROC curve. ROC curve is nothing but the true positive rate versus false positive rate curve. And the analysis is done by means of taking the ROC value, that is ROC curve value. It is known as the area under curve or AUC. So here we can see the AUC. AUC is nothing but the area under the curve, area under the TP versus FP curve. If it is 1, our decision is perfect. If it is 0, our decision is wrong. So AUC of 1 for a classifier means it is 100% correct in decision making. So we can plot TP rate and false positive rate, and we can go for finding the performance analysis by means of AUC, that is area under curve. And next is pre-trained networks. So there are a lot of pre-trained networks available in deep learning. So that can be used for our application. But the problem is that deep learning pre-trained networks have a large number of learnable parameters. So, and it is having complex in nature. So in normal system, it is quite difficult to use. We need GPU-based system to work with such pre-trained networks. These are some of the pre-trained networks developed by Google and other network people. And here the x-axis shows the relative prediction time in using GPU and the accuracy in y-axis. So the best accuracy is obtained with the NASNet large. It is in the range of 84 or 83. And this is the accuracy which is obtained with pre-trained networks. So that's why we are looking for our own networks to get better accuracy, because most of the pre-trained networks are learned on standard data sets or general images. So if you go for medical images or any other data sets, it won't give much accuracy because it is trained on ImageNet data. So we have to either use transfer learning or pre-training over here again. So these are some of the pre-trained networks in deep learning. Here you can see the depth, size, parameters, and the image input size. And also you can see that for each and every images, the input size is different. So for all the applications, we have to give this much image size for each and every image. And the size of the image networks are given in MB, and the number of parameters are shown in millions. And next set of data networks are Inception ST2, VGG network 16, VGG 19, DarkNet 19, NASNet large, NASNet mobile, ShuffleNet, all these having large number of learnable parameters. So this much parameters, because of these much parameters, these networks are not good for implementation of real-time application. So that's why we need to develop our own CNN to work with. So public data sets available. For public data sets, we have MNIST, handwritten digits are available. Animal data set is there. CIFAR 10 class, including airplane, automobile, birds, cats, etc. Smile data sets are there, images of faces that are either smiling or not smiling. Kaggle, dog versus cats. Flowers, 17 category data set with 8 images per class. Caltech 101 image set is there. Tiny ImageNet 200 is there. Audience, age and gender recognition data set is there. ImageNet large scale visual recognition challenge, ILSRVC is there. Kaggle having lot of data sets. Indoor CVPR is having a lot of data sets. Then ImageNet is there. So these are the data sets available. So I will move on to the next session. Next session is a small example of how we can use these deep learning techniques in optical application. So I will give two examples of how we can use these methodologies in optics, because we are trying to do something related to this. That's why I'm going to explain this. So here you can see we are going to do the model classification in optical waveguides using deep learning. So in this case, single mode operation is crucial in many on-chip integrated photonic devices, and thus the identification of single mode geometry is an inevitable design requirement. So we are going to design deep learning models for ultra quick classification of optical waveguide geometries into single and multimodal geometries. So we can classify it based on deep learning methodologies. So the DL model accurately predicts the boundary in the parameter space for the geometry of the waveguides that split the space into single and multimodal regions. So using silicon nitride channel waveguide and targeting both visible and telecommunication wavelengths, we can illustrate how DL models can be developed with a minimal number of exact numerical simulations to Maxwell equations. So here we see the picture shows a silicon nitride channel waveguide embedded in a silica host medium. So here SIN is a dielectric material of refractive index of 2 with optical transparency that encompasses visible and near infrared wavelength window. So the below figure shows the schematic of DL model to predict whether the given waveguide geometry is a single mode or multimodal. So here the inputs are the width and height of this SIN material, and based on these different combinations of WH, the neural network is trained, and we will, from the initial training labels, we will assign for different W value and H value, we will assign the labels. Once we assign the labels and train the data set, whenever we are giving next set of W and H value to the neural network, it will be easily to identify whether it is a single mode or multi-mode. So this is one of the application. And you can see that the performance of the neural network is measured using two figure of merits. The first one is the discrepancy between the exact boundary and the neural network predicted boundary. So as you know, as a normal supervised learning methodology, we know that exact boundary of that particular material, and we are predicting the boundary using neural network. So we can take a error between these two, and we can predict how much accurate our simulation works are. And the second FOM is the percentage of mistakes in model classification. How effectively it is classifying the modes, either it is single mode or multi-mode. So accuracy in classification. So we can use the two figure of merits to assess the methodology. And next is analysis of nanophotonic waveguide using machine learning. So in this case, a combination of finite element simulation and machine learning techniques for the prediction of mode effective indices, power in confinement, and coupling length of different integrated photonic devices. So the data set is prepared using COMSOL multiphysics, and then this data is used for training with optimizing various parameters of machine learning model. So here we use COMSOL multiphysics to get the data, different parameters and values, using this data for training purpose. And then waveguide width, height, operating wavelength, and other device dimensions are varied to record different model solution parameters. Then we can change different waveguide parameters, height, operating wavelength, then frequency, all those things can be changed, and we can record different model solution parameters. So from that we can choose the best one. So a detailed study will be conducted on the slot waveguide structure to evaluate different machine learning models, parameters including number of layers, number of nodes, choice of activation functions, and others. So after training, the model is used to predict the output for new input device specification. So once we train the network using all the derived data, the network is now ready. So we can input the different parameters, the frequency, waveguide length, width, height, and operating wavelength all can be inputted, and we can see how it works, or how much frequency we can operate. Likewise, we will get. So this is what the application of deep learning in optical application. So this method will predict the output of different device parameters faster than direct numerical simulation. So it is far better than numerical simulations. This is a flow of work, accumulation of simulation experimental data, reprocessing the collected data using normalization and shuffling, splitting the collected data into training and validation data set, training the ANN model using MLP regressor or PyTorch framework, and checking model performance on validation data set to optimize the hyperparameters. So once you train the data, After training, you have to validate the data. During validation, if the accuracy is less, you have to fine tune the parameters and make the validation accuracy much higher or close to 100, not 100, close to 100. Then you have to go for the testing. If the validation is 99%, then you may get 99% of testing accuracy too. So now evaluating the performance of the optimized model based on test data set or the unknown data set. So then you will get the result. So with this, I will end up my session. So now open to questions.
Now the session is open for discussion. Participants can clarify the queries with the resource person. Participants can also post your queries in the chat box also. Sir, actually,
Yes.
I got one doubt, sir.
Yes.
Sir, actually, that the waveguide using machine learning
Yes.
means what it actually.
So we will find out the parameters. So see how you are generally use the parametric tuning. How you design based on your parameters. You are doing analytically, right? Mathematically, you will design. Then you
Yes.
will simulate it. Then you will simulate it, right?
Yes, sir.
Simulate and you will see how much it is coming very close to the analytical proof. Okay, but here what we do is we will acquire the data from the waveguides. So say for example, different parameters like waveguide, height, width, wavelength, all this information will be inputted into the machine learning network, and we will see how we can improve the performance. For that, we will input the data, then we will train the model using all the possible combinations. Different how much frequency we can operate for different frequency bands. We will give all possible values of parameters of waveguides, and we will train the model. So once the model is trained, you can give different combinations of inputs, and we can check how much the output is.
Okay, sir.
So you will get a better option instead of going for simulation. If you have a good trained model, you can do the testing, and you can find a better design for your project.
Okay, sir. Sir, is there any specific techniques which used for this type of waveguides machine learning?
So these are deep learning methods. A lot of deep learning methods are used, just like ANN or CNN. We can use.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Sir, there is one question in the chat box, sir.
Okay. Neural network is the basis for all these things. Neural network means, as I told earlier, neural network is a neuron representation of the brain. Neural network, okay. It is a replica of neuron in human brain. And CNN is a convolutional neural network. That is a neural network which is operating on convolution. That is the difference between NN and CNN.
Okay, sir. Hereby I confirm that the session will be winded up, sir.
Okay, thank you. May I leave?
Sir?
May I leave?
Sir, for some conclusion after that, sir.
Okay, fine. Okay.
The session was very valuable. We all feel that we learned a lot in artificial intelligence. The explanation which you have given for the algorithm was in detailed manner, sir, especially convolution of an image with the kernel 3x3 and 5x5 image, and that layer explanation and all other algorithm you explained in a very useful manner, sir. I hope that the participants gained enough knowledge on this session titled Introduction to Artificial Intelligence. So on behalf of NIT Puducherry, I would like to extend my thanks to respected Dr. Varun P. Gopi sir for spending his valuable time with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So I would like to thank the Department of ECE for inviting me for a session. So thank you, and thank you to all the participants for their kind patience to listen the topics. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.